it's not just for you. What you're meant to do or produce or sell or whatever is meant to.
I thought I knew who I was, but I think I kind of lost myself a little bit. And I think that I was so busy trying to keep up with everybody and everything around me that I had really lost sight of who I was in the middle of it.
So for anyone who's like listening and thinking about writing a book, what would be your advice to them? Welcome to The Growth Game. I am so excited today to have special guest Alissa Circle on. She is a lifestyle entrepreneur and she's someone who has had a lot of media background, so I'm excited for her to bring that into the conversation today. And she's written 6 books in 2 years, which is absolutely incredible. And she's giving us so many nuggets on how you can get started if you're interested in writing a book or even just taking steps towards something new that you're starting and implementing it into your daily life. So I absolutely cannot wait to dive into this episode. Welcome, Alissa, to The Growth Game. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited because you have written now 6 books.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And writing a book is something that I've always been curious about. And I think that for a lot of my listeners, they also are curious about it. And I think it seems like this big, huge undertaking, which I'm sure it is, but like out of reach, right? So I'm excited for you to talk about that today. But first, I would love to hear a little bit about your journey and kind of just what you've gone through to get to where you are now, to a place where you have 6 books.
My gosh. Well, I mean, really to make a long story short, I started blogging in 2007. So I was what we call an OG blogger, back when literally blogging was on a free platform in black and white.
Yep,
It was just
totally.
like, do you want a white background with, black
Yes.
writing or vice versa? And I really just started because I'm not a scrapbooker by nature.
Yeah.
And my family lives all over the world. I grew up all over the world. And I had gotten pregnant with our first child, our daughter, and I wanted to be able to just keep everybody in the loop on our journey and have it documented somewhere where our children could go back one day and read through the story of their life. I love hearing about where people are from and how they got here and what their family was like and their upbringing. And so I wanted that for our children.
Love that.
And so I started blogging simply for that reason. Way a long time ago. And as the blog started to grow, I had brands that were coming to me because it really was a new wave of marketing. Somewhere around 2010, brands were realizing, wow, we have all of these like moms that are blogging and online, and social media was coming out. Facebook had transitioned from you didn't need to be a college student to use it.
Right.
Twitter, now X had just
so
come
long
out.
ago.
Instagram had just come out. I mean, I think I joined Instagram 5 days after they launched that platform. And so I just I've always been a documenter. And so brands were coming to us and starting to ask us if we would partner with them to create content. And at that point, I was just really enjoying blogging and writing. And I thought, wow, this would be so fun to be able to earn this side income, stay at home, bring my children into whatever it is that we're creating.
Yeah.
And so I started working with all of these brands on all these paid partnerships. And in about 6 months in, my husband and I were talking, and I said, we have so many incredible friends that are doing this and are so gifted. If we can partner with brands and make money, how do we help all of our friends and our community along the way to be able to do this as well? And so we created a company called Pollinate Media Group, an influencer marketing agency. And we worked with, during our decade of having that agency, over 5,000 influencers. We worked with like hundreds of top Fortune 500 brands.
Wow.
And we were talking about amazing brands and services. And it was just really, it was such an exciting time.
Yeah.
But in the back of my head, I knew that I wanted to be a writer. I mean, obviously I had a blog and I loved writing. And I missed it when we were building the business. And so I had kind of come back to my roots on wanting to do more writing, and I didn't know what that looked like. And so I really started to pray about what that looked like in my new season. And the Lord began putting on my heart to write women's Bible studies. And I had to really go back to him a lot because I was like, I am not equipped for this. Like, I've been part of Bible studies my whole life, but I don't know that I could write a Bible study. But the Lord just kept saying, just keep reading the word and I will give you what I want you to write. And then COVID hit. And so when COVID hit, all of my marketing budgets changed and our influencers were scrambling to find other sources of income. Our team was also having to do the same thing. And I really felt in that moment that the Lord was like, okay, I'm doing a new thing. And I need you to pay attention to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I need you to trust me in this, and we're gonna take this a whole different direction. And I was like, we're gonna write a cookbook, right? Like a devotional cookbook. And he was like, no, that's not what we're gonna do. But that really began my journey towards starting to write my very first book. And I really thought it was gonna be a book until as I began writing, I realized I am a teacher at heart. That's what I went to school for. And I want to teach women how to fall in love with Jesus and read the Bible and know that you have the ability to open up the Word of God and ask the Lord to reveal it to you, and He will. And that's basically how I got into, well, not into, but this is how I started writing back. I think it's been 3 years now.
I love that. And it's okay. And you have this devotional. This is what you wrote. It's called Be Known.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So Be Known is all around awakening your identity and calling in Jesus. So it's understanding who God says you are, but not just understanding it, but coming into agreement with it. There's an authority, and not just knowing what Jesus says about us, but saying, I agree with that, Lord. If you say that about me, then I'm going to believe that about me too. And then we dive into using our gifts in every season of our lives. And what does that look like in the community that we're in? And then the study ends with us diving into how Jesus models that for us. He knew who he was. He used the gifts he was given him. There wasn't a season of his ministry that he wasn't doing the work of his Father. And that's how our lives should be modeled too.
So I love that. Like, I'm so excited to dive into this now when I go home. But like, what did it look like for you, the transition between when you were like, oh, I'm going to do a cookbook. I think it's going to be this, to writing a devotional. Like, what was that process like? Because I think for a lot of people, when they're thinking about, even like myself included, because I have not written a book, so this is an interesting topic to me. It's like, what do I write about?
Right.
Like, what do I even say? So how did you like come to that? I mean, I know that was something that was on your heart.
I think I was going through a season where I thought I knew who I was, but I think I kind of lost myself a little bit. And I think that I was so busy trying to keep up with everybody and everything around me that I had really lost sight of who I was in the middle of it. And so the Lord, when he started to reveal that to me, he's like, we're going to write about identity because you've struggled with it. So once we do a work in your life and you overcome it, then you have authority to talk to other people about it and to help them walk through that journey of healing. And that's really where we began, is just the Lord did a deep work in me to understand who I was and what he has called me to, and that he does have a purpose and plan for my life, and that each of us do have a unique fingerprint, and we all have a unique story that needs to be told. And in that moment, I realized, okay, I'm not supposed to write a cookbook, and I think I'm supposed to write a book about what it means to know your identity in Christ. And so I started writing, and I would write in my spare time. So I allowed my life and my schedule and my kids and my husband were always priority. And then I would write in my free time. But then I started noticing that I was struggling to feel as though I was accomplishing anything. And I went to the Lord and I was like, wait, you said that we were going to write this book. Why am I struggling to get this book done? And he's like, because you're not carving out space to write with me. And anytime you want to do something, you have to practice doing it, right? So when we're, my son is a soccer player, and he doesn't just practice soccer when he's on the field and he has a school scheduled practice. When he comes home, he's kicking the ball around in the backyard and dribbling and practicing. And when he wakes up in the morning and has extra time before school, he's doing the same thing. And I had not carved out that time to do that. And I think part of the reason is that I knew once I wrote this book, it meant that I was going to need to be vulnerable when I was sharing my story. And there's a lot of fear that comes in that. What are people going to say when I start sharing things about my life that maybe people don't know? And how do you do it in an honorable way and a glorifying way? And so I told the Lord one morning, it was March, it was almost my birthday 3 years ago. And I said, Lord, if you start to give me the words to write, I will wake up at 5 a.m. every morning and I will write with you. And so he was like, well, okay, set your alarm tomorrow. And I said, okay. So I set my alarm for 5 a.m. And ever since then, I pretty much almost every morning, I'm up Monday through Friday at 5 a.m. and I light the same candle and I drink coffee out of this same probably 4 or 5 mugs. And I have my whole setup ready to go in the morning. And I just sit down and I'm just like, Lord, I invite you into this space and whatever it is you want me to write today. And that's how Be Known unfolded. And the Lord really did a vulnerable work in me, because every single day in the study has a personal story about my life in it. Because I wanted women to feel like if I can be vulnerable with you can be vulnerable with yourself, with other people that you're doing the Bible study with, but most importantly, with God.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's a couple things you said that got me thinking. The first thing is when you said that, you were making some progress, like doing things in your free time, but that also you were nervous. Like there was the fear there of like, what's this going to look like? And I think that for anyone who's listening, that's something a lot of people can relate to, because it's so easy when you feel called to do something or start something, pursue something new, to use time as maybe an excuse or a cop-out when the time really isn't the thing. It's, I'm scared, or I'm nervous, right? But it's easy to write it off as, I just don't have time.
Right.
So I love that you brought that up, because I think that's so common.
I do think so too. And I think a lot of times we feel called to something, or we know we have a book in us. But getting over that, like taking that first step is always the hardest, because you almost have to overcome all of your personal fears, all of your personal insecurities, and trust that what God's calling you to write about, that He's called you to write about it for a reason.
Yeah, and He's going to give you the words.
He is going to give you the words.
And to speak. And it's not just for you. I think that's such a big thing too in any endeavor, is like it's not just for you. What you're meant to do or produce or sell or whatever is meant to help or to impact someone else.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And the Word of God says that Jesus didn't come to be served, but He came to serve. So I write with that in mind, like, Lord, what women are we serving, and how are we serving them, and how do we draw them in so they understand your goodness and your kindness and your faithfulness, so that they come away with a deeper understanding of who He is and want a desire to be in the Word. Like, I love getting up in the morning now, even when I'm exhausted, because I just know I get to crack open the pages of my Bible and just allow the Lord to speak to me. And the more I did that, the more He gave me things to write.
The more you made the space for it.
Yes.
You were intentional about making the room for it.
Yes.
I love that. And this is, so you said you started doing this in 2022, right? It's 2024 now. So around 2-ish years, maybe a little more, that you've been doing this. And you've written 6 books in that time.
Yes. So they're
In 2
not,
years.
yes. So they're, I think that when the Lord calls us to things, he gives us the space and the grace to write them, to get them completed. And so I do have this Bible study, Be Known. And then I have my next Bible study that I've been working on for the last year called Become, which is the 5 rhythms for living a life that looks like Jesus's. And that one's coming out next month. And those are in-depth Bible studies. So they're written with homework in a sense. They're designed for you to spend time in the Word every single day. And we're walking through what these rhythms look like, of what does it look like to create with the Lord, to pray, to rest, to serve, to disciple. And how does Jesus model that for us? Because we always want to come back to, like, God doesn't call us to do anything that he hasn't modeled for us already.
Yep.
Well, then separately from that, we go to an incredible church, shout out Oceans Church in Irvine, California. And I was partnered up with a woman by our pastor. And this is actually like a really fun story. We had never met, and they brought us together for coffee and said, we just really feel like God's calling you guys to teach together and lead together. But most importantly, he's called you to write together. And we would love for you to write curriculum that Oceans Church women will get to go through first, but then obviously we hope that the Lord will breathe on it and it will go out to the Big C Church. And we were like, okay, like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And they're like, the first one we want you to write about is on friendship. And so we did. We wrote a 7-week small group curriculum. So it's designed to be, there's no homework. It's designed to build community of women that are chasing after Jesus together. So we have written Be You, which is on friendship, Be Transformed, which is on Romans 12. We have Be Blessed coming out next week on obedience. We didn't call it Be Obedient because, I mean, nobody really wants to know, like the blessing comes with that though.
Yeah,
so,
right.
And then we have one coming out next year called Be Faithful, and it's on Hebrews 11. And so I think that's been really fun. So I do have a co-writer for all of that side of things, and that's how we've written as much as
in
we've
2 years.
Yes, as we have.
It's amazing.
Yes,
though.
yes.
And so cool, like how, to think of like when you first had that idea of like, oh, maybe it'll be a cookbook, to now where it's evolved into these series of books, and you're writing them for curriculum for churches, like impacting even more people. It's so amazing.
Thank you.
But you would have never known that.
No.
You don't see that in the moment. And I think that's so
not.
important for everyone who's listening, like, to remember that when you have those tugs and pulls on your heart, and when you feel God calling you to start a business or do something, that you just don't, all you see is the now, and it doesn't even always make sense. Like, maybe for you it was like, well, I want to do a cookbook, or like what makes sense to you. It doesn't always make sense in the now.
And I think I guess I didn't take the Lord up on his offer, because I felt like, well, I have this other business and things are going really great. Why would I pivot?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes God calls us to pivot, and sometimes he gives us in addition to.
Yes.
And that's part of the exceedingly abundantly more that he offers us, is that we get to do more than what we thought. So running a media company was incredible. But then he was like, yes, but you're touching the lives of all of these women. And now, like, look at what else we can do to also touch the lives of these women, that they would know who he is.
Yeah.
And so I think, when God's calling you to something and he gives you that stirring, like you said, it's like we just start to ask, like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do with that? What does that look like? And sometimes he puts that on our heart for right now, and sometimes it's for the future.
Yeah.
I think that if he had done everything he did in 2022 and 2019, I wouldn't have been ready.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I was still in preparation mode. I think if you had told me in 2007 that I was going to be sitting here on this podcast today, having written all of the curriculums I've written with new books coming out, I would have laughed.
Yeah.
I would have been like, there's no way. I just have this like little blog.
Yeah.
But even back then, he was training me. When I went to school to be a teacher, like he was training me and equipping me for the calling. And I think we tend to look at it like, oh, well, there goes the end of this season and now I'm moving into a new season. But really, the gifts God's given you don't change. Yeah. But he can pivot and shift how he uses them within you.
I love that. They don't change, but just how they're used pivots and changes.
Yes.
So for you with the media company, like, do you see now, like, looking back at how that, like, helped you? Like, do you feel like that equipped you for what you're doing now?
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, if we didn't have the media company, I probably wouldn't know as much about marketing or even like writing an Instagram caption or understanding how my Facebook audience is different from my Instagram audience, which is different from my, X audience. And I think that's what it really equipped me for, is understanding the marketplace and understanding the people and how people think and how people, what it takes for them to act on something.
Yep.
And I think it was total preparation for this.
I love that. That's so, you don't know it when you're in the middle of it.
Totally.
But then it's just so cool to look back and like see how like all the pieces of the puzzle like came together.
Yes.
That's so cool. So for anyone who's like listening and thinking about writing a book, what would be your advice to them? Like maybe just as like first steps where it's just like an idea right now.
Yes. I think really the first step, if you want to write, is to set a space for it. Like actually look at your calendar, and even if it's an hour a day, everyone around you understands that for that hour you're on do not disturb and you are just practicing writing. It may have nothing to do with what your book might be about, and it might have everything to do with what your book might be about, but you're just sitting down and you're beginning to write stories, share experiences, whatever it is that is being put on your heart that you feel like, I'm supposed to put this out in the world. Maybe it's stories about yourself, and you may not know what chapter it's going to go in or how it's all going to get pieced together, but it's just you're practicing the craft of writing and you're getting into the habit, because it says 28 days to create a new habit. So you really do. You have to set aside the time, and it needs to be understood by everybody around you. For me, I get up at 5 a.m. because I'm writing not by my might or by my power, right? But it's really the hand of God on my life, because I'm exhausted at that time of the morning and it's dark and I'm like, why am I awake? But also everyone in my family is asleep. No one needs me. Nothing is required of me. And so the house is like absolutely quiet. And that's just my time. And everybody knows that that's my time. So it's like, even if you wake up early for school, like nobody bothers me during that time, because they know it's my writing time. So I would say first and foremost, like set the space and let it be the same space, and make sure it's prepared for you to write every day. So whatever tools you need, if it's your Bible, if it's a notebook, if it's other people's books that might talk about whatever it is that you want to be talking about, make sure you have that, have access to that as you're writing every day. And that'll start to get you into the habit of creating.
It's almost like exercising your writing muscle.
Yes.
Like just writing to write. Not like I'm going to sit down now and try to like write this entire book that I don't even know what I want to write, but just like exercising the muscle.
Exactly.
And I think that's really hard for people, like in general. Even like for me, it still is sometimes, especially when it comes like writing in general. Not just like, thinking about writing a book, but copy, like website copy, sales pages, captions, things like that.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing that I feel like just takes practice.
It does.
And the more you do it, the better you get at it. I mean, has that kind of been your experience? Because you've done the media side of things.
Yes.
Also, social media captions. I know everyone who's listening is like, how do I write better captions? Right? That's something people get so hung up on.
Totally. I think for me, I'm like, how do I just stay authentic?
Yeah.
And how do I give people an experience where it feels like, hey, if we were sitting together hanging out, you would get the same weird, quirky, I don't know what's version of me that you see online.
Yeah.
And so it's it can be messy, and sometimes I'm stumbling over myself, and sometimes I'm funny, and sometimes I'm super serious, but I try and show up as authentically myself as possible. And I think that's what's helped me in my practice of writing captions, because I want people to see me as relatable, as like a friend.
Yeah.
And they're invested in our friendship, even though maybe they've never met me.
I love that. And it's like almost thinking of, because I know this helps me, like I've been creating content for a long time now, but it helps me when I think actually intentionally of like, okay, who am I wanting to talk to?
Exactly.
And what is she like, and what does she need to hear? That simplifies things a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it brings you back to that authenticity, because if you're thinking about it from a perspective of, well, I struggle with this, or this has helped me, or whatever it is, then you're writing from that perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. But you want to do it in a way that makes people feel valued, feel honored, and feel brought in to like whatever, like included in whatever it is that you're talking about, and not like you're trying to sell them something.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, if we come from that perspective, no matter what it is we're writing, whether it's a Facebook caption or an Instagram caption, or trying to figure out how to talk on stories and all of that, then we come from a more genuine place, and then people really love it.
It's so funny, isn't it? Because like it sounds so simple,
right?
When you put it in those terms, but it is, we overcomplicate things.
We do
in our heads, because it's like, what's the strategy? What's the thing? Or this person did it this way, or this person says to do it this way. But at the end of the day, I think especially like when we're talking about social media,
right? It's
so easy to forget, like, there's people
yes
on the other side of the screen that are watching your stuff. Like, you're not creating for an algorithm, you're creating for humans.
Yes. I never pay attention to the new algorithms. I probably shouldn't even say that on the podcast, but I'm always like, I'm not about like algorithms or math. Math is not my subject. I'm just about showing up and trying to be as real as I can. And you just never know what's going to capture your audience and make them feel super close to you. My husband and I have been creating content for like the last 3 weeks around skunks that are freeloading under our house. And people are loving it. I mean, it's just the amount of DMs I'm getting, because people are just like, this is hilarious. You're tying bait to like fishing wire to the trap to try and get this thing, has just gotten people are like, you guys are so relatable to us right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, we do. We overcomplicate it. And sometimes it's just a matter of showing up and just being who we are, and not always showing like the prettiest corners, but it's funny. I have 6 traps sitting in front of my all over my house, but it's the outside of my house, but people are enjoying it and I'm having fun with it.
Yeah.
So you just never know.
Which that makes such a difference. Like when you're having fun.
Yes.
Because people can see that.
Yes.
Like when you're in, especially when you're in your stories and when you're talking, like if you're like showing up like, oh, this is kind of a drag, or I don't really know what to talk about.
Yes.
People feel that.
Yes, they do.
And they want to connect. At the end of the day, like we want to connect with each other.
I agree. Yeah. And I think, God created us because he wanted community. He understood relationship. And so therefore, since we are created in his image and in his likeness, we are also created to want community and to have connection with other people.
Yep.
And so I think in writing, anything that you're writing, it should have in the back of your mind, like, how am I going to connect with people? Like, how do I want to connect with people?
And okay, I just thought of this also because I'm thinking back to like the book writing and the people who are listening who are like, okay, I know I want to write a book. I don't know what it'll look like. I don't know when. Yes. Okay. I'm going to start like practicing my writing muscle.
Yes.
What does like the practical side of things look like for like actually having a book?
Yes.
Like a physical book like this out there into the world?
Okay. That's a good question. So there's multiple different ways that you can get a book out into the world. There is, some people go the route of shopping their book to an agent. So what you would do is you would create, and a lot of publishing companies and agencies have kind of a template or tool that they want you to use, which basically outlines what your book is about. It's your pitch.
Okay.
And so you can create that pitch to an agent. The agent takes it, helps you fine tooth comb it, and then shops you to different publishing companies, and you can go the traditional publishing route. I am a little bit of a mold breaker, and so I realized in the process of building my template and like kind of going out and going the agent route that I really enjoyed the creative process of putting the books together. And I was like, I just really want this to feel like it can go on someone's coffee table. I want them to want to carry it places because it's beautiful and display it. And so I went a different route and decided to do something that was non-traditional, which is to self-publish. So I have a team of people that allow me to create content, like to write our books. They go into design. We do video content, and then we publish everything just by ourselves. We have a printer that we use, that we send it off to a printer so that I have copies of it in hand. And then we also are on Amazon, so people can get our books within a couple of days. So I think it just is up to you. Some people really are like, I just know that this needs to go out in the world. And so it's wonderful that we have tools like Amazon that we can self-publish through. And then do all of our own marketing. I think it helps that I have marketing experience. So it was a little bit less intimidating for me. But I think even if you don't have, because a lot of hangups that I also hear is like, I don't have a huge social media following or a huge influence. And I think even if one person is following you, you have influence. So you need to look at how do I just talk authentically to people to grow my influence? And if people are invested in you and following you, then they're going to be excited for what it is that you're putting out into the world, and they will buy your book, and then they will buy it as a gift, and they will share it with their friends, and you just never know. So if God's calling you to it, then you just got to step into it and trust that He's going to breathe on it. And that's what we did. So I went the non-traditional route and decided that I wanted to publish all of my own stuff. So we started a company called Be Together Co., and it has a publishing arm. It has not a coaching arm, but more of a consulting arm, where if people want to self-publish or they want to get their content ready to go the traditional publisher route, we can help them with that as well.
Okay, that's amazing. That's so great. That's so cool to see. I can totally see how the like media background that's just so cool how God works like that, right?
It is.
Like how like that's all woven together.
Yes.
But I also love how you said, what was it that you said? You were talking about like before you have the book, or like, because that could take however long.
Yes.
Just showing up as yourself, because I know like for me, when I'm like coaching my students who are creating like a product, a lot of the thought process is, okay, well, once that's done and it's ready and I can tie it up in a bow, then I can start showing up. But I always encourage people, like, there's so much power in showing up now and being authentic now, even if you don't have your thing, you're you, and you can start building your presence.
You want to include people in the process, because I think people like that. They feel invested. You know, like everyone online feels like they're catching skunks with me right now. It's super weird, but they love it. And I love it because they love it. But I think in this time around, so when I wrote Be Known, even though I have my marketing background, I showed up like that. I was like, I'm just going to show up when it's done. Like half my friends, my closest friends, didn't even know I was writing that. I don't even know why I was keeping it a secret. And I was like, guess what, guys? I wrote a book. They're like, what? So this time around, I was like, I'm not going to show up that way. So I've included people in the process, and I've talked about it, and I'll share snippets of like editing or trying to figure out a cover, or when is I've even shared when I've pushed the book launch back like 3 times already. And I can do that because I'm self-publishing. So that's the beauty of it. But I think when we include people in the process, then they're invested in the journey with us, and then they want to be a part of the finished product.
People love being a part of things.
They do.
Especially when you're like getting their input
Yes.
on things like the book cover or whatever. They almost feel like they're a part of it.
Yeah. And the reality is that oftentimes starting to write a book to publishing a book can take 2 years. And I think, or more. And I think people don't talk about that enough. It's not just like you click your fingers and there it is. It all just comes out. Even if the words flow freely and you write quickly, there's still so much time that's taken in editing and design and just marketing and getting it ready that I think people don't need to worry about the timeline or the process. They just need to enjoy the experience and the journey, because we need to not think about us and like what serves us best, but we need to think about our audience and like how do we put out content that they need, and their needs should come before ours.
Yeah, I love that. This is so good. This is so many good nuggets.
I'm glad.
Because it can feel so overwhelming,
Yes.
to someone. But like the way you just described it, I'm like, anyone can do this.
Anyone can write a book.
Yeah.
I really do believe that. And I think sometimes it may come in the form of like having a stack of sticky notes in your car, or, voice memoing yourself when you're driving from point A to point B. But I think carving out time and practicing is really key. Even though I'm done writing my second study, I still practice writing every morning.
Yeah. And have you ever found like when you're in the writing process that like your direction changes from like where it was in the beginning? I'm just like imagining myself if I like sat down and I was like, okay, I'm going to have this thing written in like 6 months or whatever.
Yes.
That like it ends up being like not even what you initially.
100%. So Become is my next study, and it's on the 5 rhythms of living a life that looks more like Jesus, but that's not where I started.
Okay.
So I actually thought I was going to write a different Bible study, and it was going to have a whole different theme and a whole different direction. And I actually got 2 weeks, so 10 days I had written into that study, and the Lord's like, actually, no. And I was like, wait, what about like all this content that I've already written? And he's like, well, it's great practice, and maybe you'll use it for something else someday, but we're actually going to, change directions. And I think it was coming from just what he was teaching me in this season of this book, which is what it looks like to pray bolder prayers, to rest more, to build in rest. I'm doing a lot of I'm in a season of discipleship between teaching small group and having 2 high schoolers. I'm in just this big season of like, how do I disciple the people that God's put in my life?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of where the direction shifted. And I think if that had happened in my first book, I probably would have panicked. But my advice to you is don't panic, because if you're pivoting, it's for a reason. And nothing is ever wasted.
Yeah.
I really do feel like I'll come back to that at some point and be able to use it. And so I just don't worry. I just like kind of put it on the shelf for now. And I'm like, okay, Lord, like we'll pick that back up later. But
I love that. The thing is, that all started with you deciding to set aside time.
Yes.
Like none of this would be here if you wouldn't have done that.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the hardest, like the first step, but also the hardest for most people in anything.
Yes.
Right? Where it's like, okay, I think you said this earlier, where it's like, I need to add in the time, right? Because I have all these other things going on. So I need to find the space.
Right.
That's the hardest thing. And that takes a lot of
It does take a lot.
self-discipline.
It really does, because I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're like, I want to write a book, but I just don't have time. And I'm like, okay, go on your phone right now. Let's look at your, like where you spend your time, right? And so we're like on her phone, and I'm like, okay, now show me how much time you spend on Instagram today. And she's like looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that was like 4 hours that you could have set aside 2 of those hours to actually be writing versus scrolling. So I think like we don't think through that lens of setting aside the time. But I had a girlfriend once give me the best advice, and she's like, to really get into writing, you got to activate your 5 senses. So that's why I light the same vanilla candle every morning. And I have all of my stuff set up in the space. I use the same writing blanket. It's like this pink soft blanket that I always like wrap myself in. I pretty much write wearing the same couple of sweatshirts. It's kind of bizarre, but it works. And I love it. Yeah, and I have my coffee, and it's like you're showing up, you're setting the space, and you're showing up prepared for whatever it is that the Lord's going to do as you write. And that made a huge difference for me. And when I started doing that, and then, of course, like getting up at 5 in the morning, I felt like that's when the writing really started to flow for me.
Because I'm sure, like now you probably look forward to that time.
Yes.
Versus in the beginning, like like for me, I'm not natural. I shouldn't say I'm not a morning person.
I'm still not naturally a morning person.
But like it's hard to get up in the morning. You know?
Is.
Like when you just want to keep sleeping. But I'm sure over time you start to look forward to that.
I do. I love setting my alarm, as crazy as it sounds, especially when I'm like in the middle of like writing a book. There's nothing I love more than just being up and reading my Bible and writing whatever it is that God's put on my heart. And I don't know where he's always going to use it, but sometimes it's just for me.
Yeah.
You know, practicing that muscle is just for me, and whatever it is, I'm like, show up and speak to me, and you know, help me be a light on the hill every day.
And the thing I love about the morning, even though I don't currently, I'm working on getting up earlier, but it's like, it's done for the day. And it's not hanging over your head the whole rest of the day. You like did the thing that like was a priority to you and important to you.
Yes.
And it's done before the day starts.
I agree. And I think for me, because I'm reading my Bible, I'm giving the Lord the first fruits of my whole day.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm giving you my first fruits, and then everything else seems to fall in place. So I'm up and I'm spending time in the Word from usually between like 5 and 7. And then I'm like working out. I have a driver now. So now she drives our son and herself to school, which is amazing. A wonderful new season. And yeah, it really does. It sets the pace for my entire day. And then it's done. And I'm like, okay, I've set aside that time to write. And if I come back to writing later in the day, it just feels like a bonus. And I'm
it's like
thanks,
extra.
Lord, that was great.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love that. That's so good. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I feel like we could just keep talking about this all day. But where can everyone find you, find your books, all of the things?
Yes. So all my books are on Amazon. So you can just search my name on Amazon and you'll be able to find them.
Okay.
And then you can find me online at Alissa Circle. I live on Instagram.
We can check out your skunk adventures.
Yes, you can check out my skunk adventures.
I love it. And we'll link everything up in the show notes so
Great.
that everyone can listen. But thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I hope everybody walks away from this just encouraged that you are a writer. You do have a story, and it is a unique one that you are designed to tell. And I hope that everyone is encouraged to set aside the time and the space to just begin writing whatever it is the Lord's putting on their heart. And I'm excited. And they can reach out to me with questions.
Awesome.
And I'm excited to champion them and encourage them along the way.
I love it. Such a good message. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks everyone for listening.